Welcome to the Decide to Move podcast, helping entrepreneurs like you make smart, pivotal shifts in your life and business. Tune in each episode for inspiring stories from brilliant business minds and trailblazers to find out how they made their big moves and how you can too. Now here's your host, author, speaker, business strategist, CEO, and founder of Decide to Move, Monica M. Bijou.
Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Decide to Move podcast. I'm always excited because I have amazing guests that continue to join me every single day, every single week for you guys, every single week, that basically is providing you all kind of tips and strategies. That way you can actually make a great pivotal shift in your life. And today I have with me #1 bestseller author, Nicol McClendon. She's going to be teaching you all about how to have emotional release through your writing. So that way you can actually get clarity and direction on whenever you're making those shifts. How do you get there seamlessly without trial and error? So without further ado, I want you to help me welcome Nicol McClendon. How are you doing today, Nicol?
I'm good, Monica. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. You know, I could not go further without having you on the show because you have so much to give. And I love when people actually can take their life story, their journey, and be able to share with others and use that as an opportunity to teach other people how they can overcome. And I know that you do exactly that.
I do. So I am a corporate trainer in my 9 to 5 job. That's what I tell everyone. My 9 to 5, I'm a corporate trainer. So in my professional entrepreneurial life, I'm an author. So I am a 3-time published author, best-selling with my most recent book collaboration. And my passion, what I love to do is to help women have an emotional release through writing.
Yeah, and that's great. And what I found is that men go through the same thing too. I often assign that as a homework to my guys, and especially, you know, working with, you know, people who are struggling with trauma and different things like that. And a lot of them find that writing has helped them as well. They didn't realize putting pen to paper, how cathartic that is of getting the ability to release. We as women have taught that all the time, but I'm finding as a human being, it's something that really helps you be able to get what's stuck in here out, you know?
That's right. Yeah. I've had men in releasing books. I've actually had men who've read them and come up to me, and I've been surprised with them saying, you know, you're really strong. And not only that, I have a story too. And I always say, write it. It's not just for women. So yes, men also need to write. We all need an emotional release.
Yes. And so tell everyone where you are, and then how did you get on the journey of actually teaching and writing about having emotional release?
Absolutely. So I am very passionate about emotional release because I've used this type of writing to get me through some of life's darkest storms. And when I say that, people say, well, tell me more about that. What does that mean? So we're all living life every day, the hustle and bustle. We have many decisions to make. So just with that one aspect first, having a lot on your plate, you can use emotional release to help you find clarity. So sometimes when we're just rushing through life, we start to throw things in these different compartments, right? And we don't want to address them until maybe there's a fire and we have to. So I teach people, before it becomes a fire, let's write it down. Because if you have a checklist, a to-do list, it makes things easier to chunk out and digest them. You can eat them a little bit better. So that's one aspect. But then the other aspect was truly in having some storms that we go through in life and telling my story. I found that it was therapy. It helped me to heal and move through those storms, right? So I also teach my aspiring writers. Everyone has a story. Sometimes that emotional involvement will block you. You don't want to even relive that. You don't want to go through that past trauma or hurt. So my techniques and what I teach and my coaching is you have to, one, be ready to move past. You have to be ready to heal. And once you are, you need to just put it out on paper, release it. So I have different techniques that I teach. I'm coaching one-on-one right now. That's where I am. And I am actually doing a webinar. So I
Okay.
do a free, yeah, it's my second one this month. I did one last month. And it's to introduce people to the benefits of emotional release.
Okay.
Let them know what the benefits are.
Yeah, most definitely. So when I was saying where you are, I mean, like, what state are you in? And then, like, some of your journeys that you've actually had that caused you to say that this is exactly where I am. So I know that you're on the East
Oh,
Coast side. So what state are you actually in?
I am born and raised in Hartford, Connecticut. Yeah, I actually moved
Okay.
away for a little bit. I lived in Washington, D.C. for 7 years, and then I came back.
What made you decide to go back?
Missing home, wanting the closeness, being their family.
Yeah, yeah. And so you said that you had a story to tell, and that was what really got you on the journey. Did you always write before you end up going through something in your life? Like, has it been a part of you since, like, as a young child, or is it something that just helped you through your journey of what you went through? I know,
Oh,
understand that you had something tragic that happened, but was writing something that you did before then?
yes, writing has actually always been a part of young adulthood. I would write poems. That's actually how I started writing. So it wasn't always, I'm going to tell a story. It was more, I would see something, a beautiful butterfly, and I would just write poems. I loved just writing. I think where it started for me is I loved reading first. And in reading, I said, okay, I have a great imagination, or at least I thought so. So I just started writing. So it's been a part of my life. I would write papers in high school. I would speak. So that took a lot of writing. And so, yeah, it's always been a part of me. And then I found it again during that traumatic experience.
Yeah. Do you mind sharing with us exactly what happened?
Absolutely. So my first husband and we were young loves, and we actually got married. We have 3 beautiful children. And tragically, 10 years ago, he was murdered. So he was a victim to gun violence in Hartford, Connecticut. And that is actually what I would say what started me again to pick up the paper, because for a period during my grieving process, I shut down. I totally shut down. I could not express anything that was going on with me. And actually, the reason why is because I was more worried about my children. So I had to put my emotions and my feelings aside. And during therapy, family counseling, and individual writing was reintroduced to me. And it just reignited the passion I had for growing up. And that's when I started writing my first book.
Wow, that's amazing. And I know that was very, like you talked about it very briefly, but that was a very hard moment and a hard time.
Yeah.
And there's people that says, well, I didn't experience anything as, as detrimental as she has. However, everyone handles situations so differently, even like with right now with COVID, with the pandemic, with, racism, with everything that's
Yeah.
happening, it's bringing up a lot of emotions that a person, and you said it, you just don't even know how to express it or what to do with that information. And it
Exactly.
gets you stuck where you just literally shut down
That's
because you
right.
don't know how to even be able to articulate it with the first word. So how did you actually begin to even say, just to even start? Because I know that that was such a hard time of just even be able to put it on paper. Did you just start freely writing, or was there a
Yeah.
process that you had to go through?
There was a process I had to go through, excuse me, which are some of the techniques that I actually use in my coaching. And the first process was I actually had to be okay with not receiving apologies from my husband, because now he was gone. So once you've been with someone in a relationship for so long, you have different things that happen. But when someone dies, instantly, they're unable to tie up any loose ends. So during the period of me grieving and taking care of my children, there were a lot of things that started to come to the forefront that presented themselves to me. So I needed to write a letter, which is one of my techniques, and I needed to just explain to him how I felt. That was the first thing. And then it really became with just everyday life, being a mother. So if you take the traumatic experience off the table, I'm still a mother. I'm still in business. I'm still running a household. So that comes with, like you said, most people will say, well, I've not had a traumatic experience. Yeah, but you're living life. So through that, I would just write. If I was upset, instead of lashing out at maybe my kids or the first person, you know, that I could lash out to, I would write about it. I'm so upset. I literally started, and if I showed you my journal, there are days and pages that just simply says, I am so upset. And then I would write from there. I am so sad. You know what? Today this happened. And I started speaking to the journal through my words and just writing the story. And I actually find that you had started earlier a few moments ago, Monica, saying even in business, and because at work, I'm also a coach, I'm a trainer. So I have a period where I go in and I have to do a needs assessment. So they call me in. They always think the trainer and the coach is going to fix everything. And my first needs assessment is, what's going on? What do you need? So it's beyond results in business. And people don't think that. It's just, this is my number. This is what I'm trying to reach. No, wait a minute. So then I usually find in my coaching that I would say about 50% of the needs assessment is morale. Morale comes from people having a lot going on. They're trying to work-life balance, right? So I'm able to use that coaching, that same thing that Nicole, the writing coach, does in business. And I say, okay, what's going on? And I usually start with, well, do you even want to be here? Because if you don't even want to be here or do the job, that's going to completely block you from ever meeting your results. So I'm able to kind of interchange them because you need clarity. So let's start there.
Yeah, and that's so true. That's one of the, the way that you said you started off by just being authentic and honest.
Yeah.
My thing is, if you can't be honest with yourself by putting it on paper, it's your paper, it's your letter, it's your story. And if you can't be honest with yourself, how do you expect to be able to be honest with anyone else? And that's one of the first things also that I give my clients is, dealing with mindset, dealing with clarity. It's really starting off with just writing it. Like, I am notorious for just writing. I don't even know what I need to say. I have so many emotions going on right now that I'm all over the place. And by the time that we're done, I have such clarity around exactly what I want to say. And I'm clear, and I'm just like, and I feel better. And then I can go on about my day. And now I can put that aside, those emotions. And then if I need to address the issue, I can actually go address that issue without the emotion piece being tied to it. I can go with, hey, fact finding. Here's the facts from what's going on, and this is how it's impacted me. And it allows me to even just be able to do my business in a different way as a therapist, as a trainer, as a coach, and having a lot of people like, how do you have so many hats? It's because I'm very clear in each one of them, what my role is. And I don't merge anything together, nothing. They're apart.
They're all separate.
Yeah, it's super huge. So what for you, because I know that you said you're a 3-time writer, for a person who, well, we're going to talk 2 different parts, because I have business owners who want to start writing themselves and don't know how. And I have the ones who are they're making pivotal shifts and they just need to get direction of what really is their purpose and how to find that. Can you talk about each one of them?
I can. So with the business owners, or even just, people who don't own business, but with the business owners who want to make a shift, right? So I find that even with myself at times that we do things that we have to do first. We don't always do what we want to do, what makes us happy. So in business, I do this job or I own this business because 1, it may be lucrative. right? I'm making a lot of money at it, even if I don't like doing it. Okay. I went to school for this. And even during the time that I was going to school, I just finished because I had to put so much money into this degree. So now I have to figure out a way to recoup this investment, right? So when they're starting out, you now have to shift from, I've done everything I needed to do. Let me find clarity in what it is that makes me actually happy. And I usually find that that is when people are having a shift. You're having the shift from what I have to do to what I want to do. So my first step is, what is it that you want to do? Let's be real about one, you're doing what you have to do and you don't like it. And until you're honest about that, not much we're going to be able to do. So I think on both the shift and you just want to write a story is still for me clarity. Where are we going? What do you want to do? I mean, everyone says they want to write a book at one point for some reason. I've had so much going on. I want to write a story. About what?
Exactly.
That's my first question. About what?
Exactly. Exactly. And we and
right?
it's like, are you
it
doing
really
it?
sounds simple. So, business owner, what are we talking about?
Exactly. And I totally agree because, nowadays people see other people writing and they're like, I want to do that. But if that's not your purpose of what you're destined to do, writing a book is it's a craft. It's something that has to be inside of you. And then when you're done, it's like, okay, then what? Are you doing it just for credibility or visibility? Are you doing it just to say I wrote a book? I mean, like, what is the purpose behind?
For vanity.
Yeah, what you're doing just to say I'm an author. And it's like, okay, so what's after that kind of thing? And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, is not having, like you talk about, having clarity around what they are doing, right? Yeah. And writing, like you say, writing, having that emotional release allows you to have clarity around, why am I even doing what I'm doing? It allows you to be honest with yourself.
And I'm happy you said the honesty part, because it also is in writing. When someone says they want to write a story, I said, well, you need to be transparent, because your readers can pick up when you're being an imposter. And when I say imposter, what I mean by that, and most people say, well, what do you mean? It's, you're writing the story for the wrong reason. I'm writing my story because I want to help someone. In order for me to do that, I have to be the face of going through something and coming out the other side of that. And I have to be honest. I have to be raw. I have to be me. I have to really give you everything about me. And I do that in personal writing and in business. So when I go into a meeting and they call me and I say, okay, let's just face it. Right now, it's COVID. No one wants to be home all the time. We can't travel. Your morale is going to be low. Your results are going to suffer. You have people working at home now. 95% of my company is at home, right? Some people have never worked from home. So how do they balance everything going on around them? Okay. So I'm real about that. I actually just walk in with, I had a bad weekend, or I had an okay weekend, but it could have been better, And then they draw to, well, I can tell her. I make it a safe space.
And that's great. And for some people, work was an escape for them from home. That's right. I mean, it is being real, right? They're like, ooh, right. These kids, oh, I can't wait to go to work. See ya, kind of thing. And now not only are you at home, but the kids are at home too, or your husband. And it's also bringing out so many different other emotions out there, relationship stuff that people have avoided, stuff that people have swept under the rug for a long time and act like it didn't exist. And now you have to face it. So can you take us through steps of how to actually start getting a true emotional release and be able to actually take that next step?
Absolutely. So the first thing is you have to face the reality. So like you said, us being at home with all of my children and my husband, and I'm walking past my office, but it's an everyday, all day office, right? So the first thing is you just have to face it. I find that most times, and even, to be honest, I've been guilty of it. I'll shut down pieces, right? But now I'm faced with, wow, 8 hours of my day, 10 hours, because the hour I'm driving there and back, I'm away from this environment. I'm able to turn it off. So now that it is on all the time and I'm facing it, my first step that I do is I actually take a breather. All right. So sometimes I do have to step away and find my quiet space so that I can process. So that's the first thing. There's no way you're going to move and have a true emotional release if you don't take a moment to pause. Just take a moment to pause, breathe, because then your mind is going to start to open up some spaces so that you can start to process. Because if you're going full speed ahead and you never just slow down and take a pause, you're never going to be, it's too much. It's too much going on. So pause. That's number one. Number two, while I'm in my quiet space or I take a moment to step out, I actually do have a pad with me everywhere I go, believe it or not, in my bag, in my car. I have pads everywhere. And anytime a thought comes to my mind, either it's something I have to do, something I forgot, something I need to remember, tell someone else to do, I write it down. So the steps is writing. I'm always going to go back to writing because truly when you see it on paper, it's real, it's tangible. You can say, okay, I have 5 things here, right? And whether I go in any order, I got to get through them. And then I actually say, don't worry about the order. So that was my segue. So it's write it all down, but don't worry about the order. Take the smallest piece if you have to, just so that you can feel a sense of accomplishment. So I kind of work in different orders based on the needs of the person I'm speaking to, but it's always pause, write it down, and take it in chunks. All right, because with emotional release, as you start to relive some of the hurts or the traumas, it is very difficult to have an emotional release for someone that purposefully put everything away. You following me? Like I intentionally don't want to deal with this, so I shut it off. We find that with trauma victims or abuse, you don't want to feel that way again. So when it starts to come back up to the surface, in addition to professional help, because I am not a therapist, right? So I'm someone that has actually lived it and wrote myself out of it. But I know I've had days where in 8 hours, I sat and just cried. And it's okay to cry, even if I'm not writing, right? So you're going to have to feel that emotion again. And then I'm ready to go. And ready to go means I'm ready to write about it. I'm ready to tell someone about it. I'm ready to share it. And I always say that I move past it. That doesn't mean that it's gone. It just doesn't affect me the same way anymore.
Yeah, most definitely. And that is great, great information. So pause, write it down, and then take it in chunks. That is super huge and important. And one of the things that I always say when it comes to, trauma history and things that we've been through, it's the person's perception, how they filter. Because some people say, well, the same thing happened to me and I don't have issues behind it. But it depends on how a person perceives that thing. And if we do not literally deal with stuff, because it's going to keep coming up. Like I tell people, writing something, like when you go to the store with a grocery list, you don't sit in the car and be like, ooh, I need eggs, tomato, milk. No. Like you don't sit there and try to remember the list. You take the list and you go to the store.
Yes.
Right. So
and when you pick up a piece, you check it off.
Exactly. And so that's the same thing that happens with your brain when something happened that is not comforting and our mind, we can't make sense of it. It's going to keep coming up, whether it's in your dreams or somebody will say something that triggers you or whatever. And so like Nicole was saying, it's so huge writing something down, because that is a true huge emotional release, because once you actually write it down, you're telling your brain, we got this, we don't need to worry about this right now. And that's one of the things that I do in my therapy business with my trauma clients, is they have to write things down. They have to write their story. They have to write the sensory details of it. They have like different stages. I baby stepped them through it, but they really literally have to write out what happened, the smells, the sounds, all those different things. And just watching how it, like just seeing how the difference that you can see it in their face, how their face takes a different look and their approach, just from them being able to have, like you say, that emotional release of getting it out. And then they're able to do their business. They're able to do what's been stopping them from moving forward. So those are super huge and important.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss an episode by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show.
Yeah, they removed the block. You know, once you write it down, like you said, when you talk about the sensory, the smell and the taste and the remembering, I would always, I would say to clients, or even for myself, I say, sometimes there's a trigger for me. I can see something or something can happen and it looks familiar. It's not actually the same. It's actually not the same. It just looks familiar and it sets me off. But once I've addressed it and then I'm like, okay, I'm all right with that. That's not really what it is, So writing it down helps a lot.
Yeah. And then let's even talk about it from the other standpoint too, how you have the emotional release, but the other part of writing something down, because our brain goes by our five senses, the taste, the smell, the seeing, the touching, all the different senses that we have, our five senses. When you have a goal, like people talk about goals and they want to write it down, what do you recommend how they write those goals down that still plays into emotions?
So, and I would say my coach, because I do have a coach also that helps me to make sure I stay on track. And she says, okay, so when you're writing, right, and now you're moving on to your goals, because you do have goals. And I always say, okay, so the when you're writing it down, it has to be time-based. That's number one. So when? Right? I'm writing down my goals, but when are you going to meet it? By? Next year, 5 years from now, next month. So I always say by this date, this is what I'm going to do. So that way I see it and I'm being held accountable because it's here. I have to write down also what it takes for me to meet the goal. So who do I need? Who are my players? What's needed of me? How much time and effort is going to take me to meet that. I actually have to write down all the steps. So it's not just the goals. It's within the goals, the small steps, because now it's okay. You have to set up this page. You have to send an email. You have to call that person. It's not just, I'm going to write a book.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
What's everything that comes with that? So for me, it's just everything has to be time-based. What's needed? Who's needed. As far as the emotions, I usually have a big circle of how I'm going to feel at the end. So whether it's I'm trying to reach, what's something I can use just for instance, like a weight goal, right? At the end, I'm going to do this. I'm going to wear that dress, or I'm going to be this size, or at the end of writing this book, it's going to be a bestseller. I mean, like what is the end game? What's going to happen at the end? So that's usually how I have everybody prioritize stuff.
That's good. And you added something super huge in there that often people forget to put in there, is that, one, visualize it, right? What is it going to look like? What am I going to look like when I, have lost those pounds that I've been working on losing? How am I going to feel? Like, how am I literally going to feel when I feel it? Because our brain needs something to connect with in order to see it. Just like think about those dreams and the emotional pieces. It's connected to a memory. And it's going through the what you see, how you felt, all those different things, reversing that from the goal setting, the vision side of it, not just have, that's why people say create a vision board, because you're looking at it, right? But don't just look at it. How is that going to feel? Like I remember when something simple, but like on my vision board, I wrote Budapest. I was going to take my daughter and I were going to go to Budapest. And yes, I did get to go because I literally put a picture in there. First, I wrote everything out. Then I went and found pictures that resonated with how I felt Like it had to be like the colors and just
Yeah.
certain ones. And I will look through Google and find pictures that really resonated with the feeling that I would have if I got to go. And then not only that, but I was like, okay, what are we gonna do? And what smells? You know, it's like you can vision the smells and all these things.
What am I
And we
gonna
got to
eat?
go. I didn't hear you.
I said, what am I gonna eat?
Yeah, exactly. The food, and we went, and it literally was everything that I had saw, smelled, tasted, like everything, because I planned it and by using all of my senses. And that's how my sensories, and that's how I accomplish things, is by doing that, touching into every single space. So that way when I go to sleep, I'm visualizing, I'm dreaming it, I can see it. My body is already able to go into action, because your body follows what you vision and what you see. So I think that's super huge, of understanding how emotional release writing is both places. It doesn't always have to be something traumatic. It definitely can be something that what you want to see accomplished in your life.
Absolutely.
You want to say you're going to win $1 million. How is that going to feel? What you going to do with that money? Right?
Yes. Absolutely.
What are people going to say to you when you win that million, besides, can I borrow some money?
Right.
You know, what are you going to say to yourself? Like, those are the things that's super huge and important, and that we often beat ourselves up instead of being so real with ourselves and authentic. That is now my new thing, is just being an authentic icon versus an unhurt messenger, you know, when it comes to having that emotional release. I think it's super huge and important.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
It is very important.
So what else do you recommend that people do?
Sorry about that. What else? So writing, you know what I'm finding lately? So I had a client, she actually stopped writing because she said it didn't make her feel good. But the biggest thing is that she was worried about the people around her. So I think it wasn't actually, it had more to do with family and friends and what they would think. So a big piece in it, writing and being in emotional release, because emotional releases, you're telling me your story or things that have happened to you. There are other types of writing, right? And not everyone comes from a place of a personal story. Mm-hmm. So other things I tell people is that this is first about you. So this is your time to be selfish, because it's about your healing. And then how do we work in techniques so that you can have your emotional release and your healing and not hurt the people around you? And there's two ways. So sometimes you're just not going to have to care. It's your story. You have to release it and let the chips fall where they may. Because in order for you to move from carrying all of this emotional baggage and healing, you're just going to have to let it go. So that's one thing. The other is you can tell your story and not name people, right? You could tell your story and maybe the description is of how that person made you feel or what that person did to you. And you don't have to say, Nicole did this to me, you know, right? So I work through the fear. I help them, or my hope and my try, what I do with people is to work through the fear of caring. Yeah. Okay. Because that's why you're in the place that you are right now. Because you didn't care about yourself. You cared about everything else.
And not only that, but everybody, the right? We talk about rights. People have a right to their feelings and emotions. And I don't have the right to talk, you know, to say, I know how you're feeling, or I'm going to think what you're thinking, that kind of thing. You have the right for your own feelings and how you respond to things. And I have the right to mine. And we can be watching the same movie or be in the same situation and interpret it totally differently. And if I'm so focused on how you felt and your outcome, then I stay stuck. I stay not being able to feel free and being able to say or express how I feel. And oftentimes I find that becomes the true thing, that there's people operating in a space that is not even their purpose or where they're supposed to, because of what someone else told them that they want them to do.
That's right. You're not even able to have healthy relationships because you're doing everything someone else wants you to do. So then it starts to affect you, or it just totally takes over your life. So you're not authentic. right? You're not, because you're wearing a mask, and it's time to take the mask off, because the resentment towards that person that you're doing everything for, caring more about their feelings, how could that be a healthy relationship?
Yeah.
Right? You're not being true to yourself.
Yeah.
So
And
you have
also
to push past that.
yeah, and also the resentment that you have for yourself.
Yeah.
That's one of the letters that I often have people do, is write a forgiveness letters to themselves.
Yeah.
And they're
Yeah.
like, for myself. And
Mm-hmm.
then when they write it, they was like, oh my God, I know I had all this stuff going on inside of me. Because oftentimes we have to forgive ourselves for not being kind to ourselves, for holding ourselves back, from restricting ourselves from doing certain things, from following someone else's lead, because we're in control of our own destination and our own destiny. And so I often have people write a letter of forgiveness to yourself, so that way you can start, because you forgave everyone else, but what about you? Have you forgiven yourself? To
That's right.
really allow yourself to be released.
One of the first things that my therapist, like I said, years ago, when I first went through one of the hardest times, if not the hardest time of my life, she actually said, you're going to have to forgive yourself for all the times that you stayed and maybe you should have left, for some of the things you put up with. And now that you're faced with being alone, you're going to have to forgive Nicole first. So I did actually have a process where during my writing, I didn't write myself a letter, but as I read, I would write and I would read, and I would write and I would read what I wrote. And I had a cleansing where I started to say, it's okay. It's okay. You made a choice, and that's fine. And you learn from it. So I did have to forgive myself.
Yeah, and that's great. And I want to add another thing, something that you particularly did, because you said that a person can, like not really, like kind of let it go. They can also not name the person, but something that you did when you wrote your book about your father, or about your husband, your children's father, there was something particular that you did to help them as you told the story.
I did. So with my first book and telling pieces of me through that story, I actually have my daughters. I do have 3 children, 2 are girls, and the 2 girls actually played the role of editor. And it was more so for them to read the story before I released it to the world. And it actually was it was a therapeutic experience for all of us. But I remember one day my oldest daughter saying, I remember that, or I remember that. She said, however, that wasn't her version of the story. So that goes back to, you and I are watching the same movie, right, Monica? And I feel one way, you feel one way. If I'm too worried about what's going on with you, then I can't feel. And she said, I heard that. You have children living in the house. They hear everything that's going on, right? And it helped me so much, because I was releasing my story. It wasn't their story. It was through my lens, what I lived. And when she said, wow, I didn't see it that way. That's why I tell people, tell your story. Don't worry if someone around you or your family is, well, why didn't you tell us? Or that didn't happen. Well, that happened to me, and that's how I felt. So that was my reality. You were looking from a different lens. So what I did was having them read it, and it was chapter by chapter. And as we were editing, and I remember that experience of 8 hours sitting, and as I was reading and they were doing their thing, and I just started crying, and they just stood there with me, literally on each side, just stood there. They didn't say one word, and they just let me, because that was my reality. That is what happened to me. And although I was telling a story about their dad, whom they love very much, and I did too, right? So they knew I wasn't coming from a place of hurting him. That was me. That's what I was feeling. And that is why I am so passionate, honestly. And when I talk about it, people are like, all you talk about is writing. And I'm like, because that's what helped me. Like, I shouldn't be here right now. And when I say that, like, there were times where no plan or ideation, but suicidal ideation, but I just didn't want to be. I didn't want to feel. But when I started writing and releasing, it helped me get through the next day and the next day and the next day. And that's why I'm here today. So
yeah. And that's beautiful. And I'm glad that you are here because you have so many gifts to share with people based on your journey. And I always say we go through things for not just for ourselves, but for other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've even started seeing how people use like their email to their audience, their tribe, the people that's on their email list by writing about their experiences is allowing their followers to connect with them by saying like, today I woke up and, had a day and they thought of something, and then they'll actually write a story with it. Like I actually did a lesson learned on my Facebook based on the fact of having my shoulder surgery and then my, dropping my hard drive. And I
read that.
I could have been super upset, but I was like, my Mac had corona. It was like, no, you're not hard drive. You're not coming in here today.
You're not coming in here.
Put your mask on. I got mine, and my PC's like, come on in. I don't know what you got, but let's come on in, And it's true. You could just take your everyday experiences and write something about it, or do a Facebook Live, or because speaking also allows that. I can honestly say putting pen to paper is a lot more cathartic because it allows that emotion. But for some people who don't feel comfortable writing, so we talk about emotion release through writing, you can actually take a recorder. Please forgive me for all the Android users because I don't know much about Android, but I do know that the iPhone has several recording apps. I'm sure that Google does too. See, I don't know. So I ask for forgiveness, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of free recorded apps where you can actually record and be able to just say exactly, what you're feeling and get it out. I know I've done that a couple times where I'm like, actually, someone had sent me a voice message, and OMG, I was so, I was upset. I literally was so upset because it was so rude and demeaning, and this person was not coming from a good place. And most people's thing is to pick up the phone and be like, blah, right? But I didn't. What I did was I pulled up one of my little recording apps and I recorded exactly what I wanted to say. And I was like, I feel better now. And I went on about my day. And I no longer had to say anything to that person. And then once I did say something, I came from a place of truth. And I actually said, they were like, why are you ignoring me? Why aren't you talking to me? And I actually responded, when you're ready to hear the truth, then we can have a conversation, because until then, there's nothing for us to talk about. Because I already knew in my heart of hearts that some people are not ready to hear the truth. And so I'm going to give you the option to hear it. I'm not going to sit there and say, because I got released from it, I didn't have the need to say, well, I need to let them hear what I have to say. I actually was able to heal myself, get my emotions out. And then when it's time, if you're open to hearing what I have to say and how it impacted me, then we can have that conversation. But some people are not ready, and that's fine. But that's their journey. That's their story. And long as I say mine, I'm not going to put myself in their story. And oftentimes people do that. So
yeah, it's part of a crucial conversation. If someone, you have to think about, what is the person in it for? It sounds like that person just wanted to win or to make a point. So in that case, if you're having a conversation with them, you're not going to get anywhere. So you were right.
Exactly.
I'm not ready to do this with you, and you're not going to hear me anyway.
And that's exactly why. And that's what some people said, like, you said, I'm going to go back to a point you said earlier. You said that, with your husband passing away so suddenly, there was a lot of loopholes open, and there was a lot of things that you didn't get closure for. And I find people being stuck because they're like, well, I just need closure, like, especially in relationships. They want to have that last conversation and keep going back. But what happens if you can't get closure? You have to get closure within yourself.
So you have to find it yourself.
Yeah. So did your writing help you get closure and be able to have that space? Like, how did you do that where you never were going to get an apology from him? So how did you find closure when you didn't get to hear it?
I had to actually write everything I needed to say to him out. So similar to you with the voice recorder, so that I had to write, and I wrote, and it was every hurt things I had, the mess I had to clean up, with those loose ends and how that made me feel. I had to release it. I couldn't scream it at my kids and he did this and, so I had to say it to him. And I wrote the letter. I actually did that for him. And it was just everything. And I would talk to him and I would actually speak out also. So I would get in my car and I would just scream. So mine was not locking it inside. I had to release it out because if you're never going to speak to that person again. You're not going to hear what you want to hear. So that is when some people just shut down. But I knew I had to express that. I actually would just speak it out. Like if something would happen, I'd be like, yeah, because and I know it sounds I don't want to say crazy, but to some people that's like, are you talking to yourself? Well, actually, I'm not. Right? I'm actually talking to somebody else. And I'm hearing something. And it's not like voices, it's just something's going to make me feel better. And I did that a lot. I used to actually speak out a lot.
Yeah.
Just scream, just say, driving in my car. Like, how could you? How could you do this? Like, really? And then I would laugh like I am right now. Like I'm laughing because I remember the days. I really remember driving in my car and saying, right, okay, serious. And it made me feel better. So writing and speaking into my Android voice recorder helped me also.
Thank you. So so for helping me being a non-Android user for a very, very long time, what recorder does the Android have on it in Google Store?
We have voice to text, so we can speak. So I use that because it saves the recordings. But I also have, I wish I could find the name, and I'm not going to struggle with it right now. But it's voice recorder. I think that's the name of it.
Okay. Apple has the voice recorder too. Okay. Gotcha.
It is voice. See? It is voice recorder. It's a little red app.
I know exactly which one you're talking about with like the blue, the red with some
it has the little voice line through it.
Got it. Okay, so sorry y'all, don't be upset and be like, well, I'm not listening to her anymore. I am learning here. It's been a long time. I think I didn't start using iPhones, Apple, because I was anti-Apple, I have to admit, because one, we're against stuff that we don't know anything about.
Yeah.
So I'm not against Androids, but I just haven't used one since I was in Germany because it was so much easier just to get one. Actually, no, Korea. So that was 2012. So that was 8 years ago. The first time I went to Korea that haven't had an Android, because once I got an iPhone, then in Korea was a lot easier. It was like, I think it was super cheap everything in Korea is super cheap. And the way that they have their plans. So then when I went to Germany, then I got a different, upgraded my iPhone because it was easier to swap in and just progressed. And so, sorry, it's been a long time. And so, everything, look, technology has changed.
It has. It's all right.
So Nicole, if someone wants to get in contact with you and learn more information about emotional release and just have some things that they want to talk to you about or share, or just even be able to find you, where are you hanging out and how can they connect with you?
So I have Instagram and Facebook, and I made that really easy. It's author Nicol McClendon. So my first name is Nicol, no E. And my last name is McClendon. So that's Facebook and Instagram, author Nicol McClendon. And then my email, author NicoleMcClendon@gmail.com.
And I'll make sure that everything is in the show notes so that way people can get those and find you. And so what's next for you? What's your next project?
Yeah, so right now, I actually just launched my community on Facebook, and it's called Courageous Conversations for Writers. So I'm working on that as a safe space for writers, aspiring writers who need an emotional release, but they need a safe space to be able to do it. Because again, I hear people saying, well, I don't know if I can share this, or who can I talk to? So if they have a space to start sharing the stories, maybe it'll help them release it to the world. So that's the first thing. Also, I have a webinar, July 18th at 1 p.m. I have a free webinar on Zoom And I am introducing people to the benefits of emotional release. I am also coaching one-on-one, helping people tell their stories, say it's all right, let's get it done. And co-authoring a new book that will be released in November with someone that had a story to tell. Actually, a man, he had a story to tell, so that's coming out. I actually did forget my website, NicolMcClendon.com. So if someone wants to send me an email over there, they can find me there too.
I would definitely do that. And so just in case like the episode doesn't show before you have your webinar, do you have ongoing webinars to bring people into your tribe? Okay.
Yeah, once a month I am planning to do that.
And so what is the dates for August, just in case that's when it airs?
So I don't have August yet, but guess what? I will do a date now because that is a goal. It is time specific. And I can tell you, I can do August 15th. So the next webinar will be August 15th. And I'll have that link up and scheduled.
Great. And so by the time when we put in the show notes, we'll put the time, the date, and everything in there.
Absolutely.
So that way people can connect with you, definitely, so that they can attend the webinar. And honestly, it's been a pleasure having you here with me. And I'm going to actually pronounce your name correctly because it's Nicol. That's why there's no E, people. So just remember that. And it's just great having you here and being able to share your journey and just seeing what all you've done out, to overcome all the trials and tribulations that you've experienced. And, with life being life, we're constantly going through trials and tribulations. And so for those listeners, as well, those are viewing us through YouTube, remember the steps that Nicol talked about. You want to make sure that you pause, you want to write it down, and you want to take it in chunks. And you're going to have people who are going to like what you have to say, and some people don't. Do you prefer for a person to like you for what you're not, or like you for being authentic? I think I chose the latter.
Me too.
Yeah, the latter allows you release. It allows you to be authentic, and it truly allows you to make those different shifts that's happening in your life as well as in your business. And guess what? For those that have children, your kids are watching you. Friends are watching you. People are constantly watching what you're doing and how you handle things. And without you even realizing it, you're an inspiration for them. So allow your journey to continue, but doing it the way that will allow you to show up and be healthy, healed, and without having emotional baggage holding you down.
That's right. Yes. And thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you. Most
definitely. And any last words for our listeners?
I do. I just want to tell anyone listening, all of the listeners, that you are entitled to have and feel your emotions. You also need to have an emotional release to heal. And you need that every day. Every day I'm writing. I wake up writing. So please take time out and have your emotional release.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nicol. This has been absolutely great having you on the show. And thank you all for joining me for another episode of Decide to Move. And I look forward to talking and seeing and hearing from you soon. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Decide to Move podcast with Monica M. Bijou. If you are ready to make a pivotal shift and take your destined position in the world, then schedule a free discovery call by going to www.decidetomove.com. For all links mentioned in today's show and to listen to previous episodes, go to www.decidetomovepodcast.com. And remember, we've all been delivered rotten fruit in our past. We can choose to chew on the rotten fruit trying to convince ourselves it's what we want, or we can become the fruits of our labor and create an incredible, fulfilling, and inspiring life and business out of it. You have what it takes to create the life you want.